clerk's laptop. Sound check, clerk's laptop. Sound check, clerk's laptop. Sound check, presentation laptop. Sound check, presentation laptop. Mayor's Task Force on Economic Recovery, September 25th. Presentation laptop, sound check. Presentation laptop, sound check. Clerk's laptop, sound check. Clerk's laptop, sound check. Presentation laptop sound check. Presentation laptop sound check. Clerk's laptop sound check. Clerk's laptop sound check. We are now live. Just let me unmute my chair.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Mayor's Task Force on Economic Recovery. Just a reminder that the City of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabeg to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase, 1792, between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And today, the City of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. And we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live, temporarily archived on the city's website. Let me just go through roll call, and I'll announce the names of members. And just if you're here, if you can just speak up and let us know that you are here. I'll start with Mayor Fred Eisenberger.
Here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nan. Don't see Councillor Nan. Councillor Danko. I don't see Councillor Danko. Councillor Whitehead. Matt Affinik.
Present. Good morning.
Morning, Matt. Florencia Bernstein.
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Rondalyn Brown.
Here. Good morning.
Good morning. Kelly Duffin. No. Aaron Dunham. Mark Elliker.
Mark Elliker here. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Mark. Patty Hall. Carrie Jarvie. Terry Johns.
Here.
Morning, Terry.
Morning.
Lisa LaRocca.
Here.
Morning, Lisa. Keenan Loomis.
Good morning.
Morning, Keenan. Brian Lovers.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Anthony Marco.
Here. Good morning, everyone.
Morning. Rob McCann.
Present. Good morning.
Morning, Rob. Kim Martin.
Just trying to get in.
Okay, hopefully Kim will join us soon. Bob Monroe. Okay, Matteo Patricelli.
Here, good morning.
Good morning, Matteo. Kathy Puckering.
Here. Good morning.
Morning, Kathy. Ty Shattuck.
Present. Good morning.
Morning, Ty. Drew Splurstra. Judy Travis.
Good morning. I'm here.
Morning, Judy. Henry Weigel. And Gay Yayatung.
Here. Good morning.
Good morning, Gay. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, we have an additional, I'm sending Kim the information about the meeting. We have an additional item today in front of us, which is the keeping a worker lens on economic recovery and sustainability from Anthony Marker, who is our representative from the Hamilton and District Labor Council. So that is the one additional item that we have.
Okay, and we'll put that in as item 7.1 under discussion.
Yeah, discussion item. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thanks so much. Could I get a mover then for an amended adoption of an amended agenda? Mark, I see your hand. Thank you so much. And a seconder, Keenan, I see yours first. Thank you very much. We're just going to vote by show of hands. So all in favor? Opposed, if any? Okay, great. That's carried. Thank you so much. Just a question to the task force members. Are there any declarations of interest? Madam Clerk, do you see any?
I see none, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Last meeting was on August 25th. There were a set of minutes that were set out. Can I have a mover to approve the minutes of August 25th? Mark, I see your hand again. You're quick on the draw this morning. Thank you so much. A seconder, Terry. Any discussion? Corrections? No. All in favor? Just show of hands. Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
We have two pieces of correspondence on the agenda. Are there any questions on the correspondence? Those are items, I think, correspondence from the Hamilton Transit Alliance respecting the viability and growth of public transit, and correspondence from the Hamilton 2026 Commonwealth Games Bid Corporation respecting the economic impacts expected from the Commonwealth Games. If there are no questions, could I have a motion to receive items 4.1 and 4.2? Please. Ty, thank you very much. Terry, thank you for seconding that. Any discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Thank you so much. All right, we're moving along nicely. This show of hands old-fashioned voting system seems to work quite well, so thank you for that. So we're moving to the consent items. 5.1, panels and discussions. Sarah Whalen, the Senior Project Manager at HPSI, is here to speak to the EDI panel. And Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you for having me today. I've been asked to give a less than 5-minute overview of what happened at the EDI panel that took place on September 10th, which was a presentation from a local expert on these areas, Professor Emile Joseph of McMaster University. And like many of you, I've been reading a lot on these topics this summer. And prior to that as well. And what I took away from his talk, really I've got 4 main pieces that I think for those of you who weren't able to attend. First of all is attention to what these terms, equity, diversity, and inclusion mean. Equity refers to fairness. And again, this is like a super high level EDI 101, which is really inadequate for anyone, but it just gives some taste of what we should be thinking about in this task force. Diversity speaks to representation, that is the richness of voices and experiences that contribute to quality decision making. And inclusion focuses on a sense of belonging and people who are part of an organization or a decision making table feeling valued and recognized, and an awareness of who is left out, who is not at the table. So what I really took away from this is that it's really about process and outcome. It's not about appearance. We know who is most affected by exclusion and marginalization, and where we see these things in our society in terms of employment, income, housing, education, and the like. I think one thing that Professor Joseph really focused on is the multi-layered nature of exclusion. We think about, especially in the news this summer, a lot of people saying, I'm not racist or I'm not prejudiced, but these things happen at multiple layers. There's individual, institutional, and structural. So over time, and he gave historical examples of how sometimes even one person in a powerful position, their bias might become embedded in policies and practices that perpetuate over decades and even centuries, and that the result can be a system of policies that work together to negatively impact communities of color or other communities. So that was number 2. Number 3, I already said actually, that the past prejudices and individual bias continue to be manifest in current policies and practices. Okay, and then the fourth is really, what do we do next? And I see that Councillor Nan sent to all of you a list of 3 resources, including the feminist recovery that is more produced out of Canada. And these resources are really good for thinking about how the task force can move forward with next steps on this. But my takeaway is really that there's no quick checklist that we can look through to make sure that decisions are equitable and inclusive. It really is about a process. And the process includes having the right people at the table and listening to everyone and making sure that everyone has a voice. So going forward, the task force must continue to have a diversity of voices around the table, and any initiatives that are proposed that come out of this task force must continue to have that kind of representation and diversity present and embedded. And another question to ask is, how do we ensure that our response goes directly to the communities that most need it, and that the policies and programs are accessible, and that these communities who are at the margins, older people, racialized people, socioeconomic status issues, immigration status, that they are actually prioritized in here. And then finally, what are the outcomes and how are they evaluated? So we have accountability to diverse communities to show them how these outcomes can be measurable, and we can collect data to make sure that the outcomes are equitable. And just one final note is that some of these themes did come up this week in the throne speech. So I think that's a positive sign. Of course, a throne speech may or may not end up in a legislative reality, but just a point that these ideas are not fringe ideas. They are becoming, I think, more and more mainstream and more recognized for a successful long-term impact. And that's what I have to say.
Sarah, thank you very much. Thank you for that very crisp recap of those sessions. We're going to take comments on this, but I'm going to get a second report back first, and then we'll take comments on the 2. Trevor Imhoff, the Senior Project Manager, Air Quality and Climate Change, is here to speak about the Climate Action Panel, and we'll be sharing a few slides with you. So we'll hear Trevor's presentation as well, and then we'll receive the information, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Can everyone see my screen okay? Yes, seeing some nods. Great, thank you. So through the chair to the members of the Mayor's Economic Recovery Task Force, it's my pleasure to present a summary of our panel presentations and discussion on our recommendations on how a resilient recovery through climate action can happen. We were very delighted to be invited to provide 2 panel presentations to the working group members in August and September. At these panel discussions, we presented information on Hamilton's greenhouse gas emissions profile and reiterated what leading scientists across the world are saying, that not only is taking climate action important, but getting to a clean zero carbon economy by 2050 is absolutely essential for a sustained economic prosperity. We need to start these actions now, and our team believes that the following 6 priority areas hit on all 3 of the so important pillars of a just recovery, including equity, diversity and inclusion, job creation, and climate action. Our team also provided a detailed resource document providing information for all 7 working groups on further recommended climate actions. So by ensuring an inclusive lens that focuses on labor, equity, and diversity, these following 6 climate actions will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and create and train individuals in high-paying, skilled jobs. These 6 priority areas focus on the highest greenhouse gas emitting sectors in Hamilton, including buildings, transportation, and industry. These priority areas also touch on the hardest hit industry of tourism, as well as ensuring we focus on underserved communities, including rural and low income, to provide a just transition. Again, we greatly appreciate the work of the Mayor's Economic Recovery Task Force and the opportunity to present to the working groups and to you all here today. I want to thank our stellar team in collaboration with the Bay Area Climate Change Council, specifically Richard Corsell, who is the chair, Kate Flynn, the director of the Center for Climate Change Management at Mohawk College, as well as Allison Maxted, who's the new coordinator for the Bay Area Climate Change Office. I'm also joined by my colleague Andrew McDowell on this WebEx. If it wasn't for this team, I wouldn't be able to pull this data together so quickly and pull complex data and information to present to the working groups in a concise and logical manner. We definitely are fully committed to continuing this collaboration with the task force and our economic development colleagues. So definitely let's stay in touch, and thank you very much for your time.
Trevor, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much for your recap of those sessions. Can I have a motion to receive the information on the EDI panel and the information on the climate change panel? Mark, thank you very much. And the seconder, Keenan, thank you. I saw your hand first. Just all in favor, please. Opposed, if any? Thank you. That's carried. Sorry, I meant to open that up for speakers, but maybe we'll take any speakers now who want to speak to either one of those items. Madam Clerk, are there any in the speakers queue?
I do not see anyone in the speakers queue.
No, I don't see any hands, so we'll just move on. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to move to item 5.2 in the agenda. This is an opportunity for the working groups of the task force to report in. You'll remember at the last meeting in August, working groups, I think it was 1, 2, and 6 reported in. So we have 4 presentations that we're going to hear from today. So this is the rest of the working groups. We're just going to do it in numerical order because that's the way my mind works. So we'll start with group 3, then 4, 5, and 7. So group 3, just to remind you, is agriculture and the circular economy. Co-chairs are Matteo and Drew, and I'm not sure who I'm kicking it over to. Maybe Matteo, are you kicking it off?
I think it's probably me, Drew.
Drew? Okay.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, Drew. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Sorry, you'll have to bear with me. I'm multitasking today as we get ready for another day of harvest. So I'm doing a few things here at the same time. But anyway, so we, Matteo and I and our group, we got together with some of the staff from the City of Hamilton and some outside resources as well for the Ontario Federation of Agriculture and the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. We tried to put a lens on this group, certainly from the rural area, but as well with a focus on economic development and the environment as well. So Hamilton, of course, is about 79% of its land mass is a rural area. We see this as the backbone to rural life in Hamilton. And I'm not actually sure if everyone has my document or not, or our document in front of them. Sorry, I can't screen share it from where I am, but I'll just walk through it anyway. Primary agriculture is a significant economic provider in Hamilton, the Golden Horseshoe, and Ontario. Despite the fact that we're in the region with the largest concentration of urban development in Canada, Hamilton and the Golden Horseshoe are home to many farms and generate substantial annual economic impact. The number of farms and farmland in this area have decreased, but the economic value of agriculture has continued to increase between 2011 and 2016. In 2016, Hamilton was home to 810 farms, generating over $259 million in gross farm receipts on almost 130,000 acres. The COVID impacts. Food supply chain has dealt with its share of disruptions through these unpredictable and uncertain times, including surplus products, reduced markets, meat processing plant closures, labor issues, and loss of contracts. In a recent survey, many farm owners expressed concerns over shipping livestock to processing facilities, followed by the shipment of finished products and grain. There have been significant impacts on the equine industry, maple syrup, honey sales, mushroom sales, loss of farmers market access, and as well on-farm sales. Now, through the summer, a lot of the on-farm sales have recovered. When folks are out and about, that has been a positive change throughout COVID with farm gate sales. Farm businesses across the city and the province are working tirelessly to manage their operations through these financial losses. Surveys again show that over 61% of farmers have experienced some type of lost revenue, and consumer spending has dropped. I'll go, I guess, to our key issues and recommendations. We, again, focused on a few things, but our four main priorities are the regulatory environment that we have to work in here in Hamilton. Hamilton's regulatory environment for creating, growing, and enhancing business opportunities in the rural area of the city, we believe needs a makeover, particularly now in a COVID recovery. Growing a business in Hamilton should be simple and encourage process, especially when a business produces or processes or warehouses food products, creates and fosters a better environment, and or reduces waste. Small and large businesses and the city have an opportunity to work together to grow the local economy, create jobs, and keep people safe and fed. Our second main point was on support for local food production and marketing. Global trade, success, and growth. Pandemic, however, countries and regions have looked closer at what can be produced locally to supply consumer needs. Hamilton Farms offers some of the best local food products in the world. With targeted investments in infrastructure and economic development opportunities, Hamilton can lead the way in a local food production and processing capacity. Our third main focus was on rural connectivity. This has been a main theme throughout the task force work on broadband and cell coverage, but COVID-19 has certainly highlighted the issues in rural Ontario, the issues that we've had with internet and cell coverage for many years. Reliable internet supports farms and rural communities. Without it, our businesses, residents, and schools are at a competitive disadvantage. Broadband and cellular networks are critical infrastructure. It's been 4 years since the CRTC declared broadband internet access a basic service in Canada. For Ontario farmers and businesses, a high-speed connection means increased productivity, improved marketing, and the ability to reach a wider range of consumers. To stay competitive, Ontario farmers and rural residents must be connected. Better connections will open opportunities for our agri-food sector and our rural communities. Our fourth and final recommendation, our key issue, is on farmland preservation and protection. The Greater Golden Horseshoe already faces rapid growth challenges, including sprawling growth and traffic gridlock, high housing costs, and environmental degradation. The continuation of converting prime agriculture land for urban development will negatively impact our most valuable resources, and that is, of course, soil and water. This issue not only extends into the Greater Golden Horseshoe area, but across the province as well. Less than 5% of Ontario's land base can support agriculture production of any kind. In the Golden Horseshoe, much of this agriculture land contains our most productive classes 1, 2, and 3 soils. Land capable of supporting agriculture activity ensures a safe, sustainable food supply, fuel, and fiber for Ontario. Furthermore, the loss of these resources will greatly impact locally produced food and our food security. Intensification of residential development within the existing urban footprint in the context of complete and livable communities is definitely the solution. It will boost economic growth, create new jobs, provide new affordable housing options, ensure food security, and contribute to environmental stewardship. Hamilton farmers are proud to cultivate some of the most fertile and productive soils in the world. When we lose agriculture land to urban sprawl, it's lost forever. All Ontarians and Hamiltonians will benefit from the economic and environmental benefits productive land and water resources bring to this area. So those are our key main focuses. I do have the chart here with our breakdown of lead partners and responsibilities, but I'm sure staff can go through that. So I think that's probably it for me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Drew, thanks very much for laying out the priorities so clearly. Maybe some positive news in the throne speech in terms of the broadband and the investment the government's talking about in terms of rural connectivity. So hopefully that comes through. Any questions for Drew while we have him before he heads back to work? I still know how to drive a tractor and a combine, Drew, just in case.
Well, what time are you done here today?
Not as early as I'd like to be.
Yeah.
Any comments from anybody? Drew, I don't see anything right now, so we're going to we'll move on to the next presentation if that's okay. If there are questions, we'll have to circle back to you then.
Yeah, no problem. I'll be listening in.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
All right, let's move to Group 4, Arts and the Creative Economy. The chair is Florencia. Florencia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Excuse me. So our working group is made up of myself, representing visual arts and museum sector, Bob Monroe, who represents film and TV, and Lisa LaRocca, who represents music and live performance sector, part of the sector. Our working group did pretty extensive outreach to other parts of our sector to get a kind of full breadth of feedback and consultation from the various components. Our sector is very diverse. We have everything under performance arts. We've got film and TV. We've got visual arts. We have both small and large organizations, and both for-profit and non-profit organizations in our sector. So the needs of our sector are quite varied. I also want to just extend a little bit of a thank you to Debbie Spence at the city, who provided a lot of support around the fashion industry part of our sector, since we didn't have a lot of networks in that part of the sector. So I'm going to share my document. We've put together a number of recommendations, which I'll walk everybody through right now, and I'll share the document so you can also look at it. Let me see here. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go through this briefly because there's quite a lot of recommendations. So I'm going to skip over the timing. People can look at that on their own later on. So we've grouped them in sort of different sections, different parts of our sector. The first dealing with film, TV, and performance. So we've identified that there's not enough locations for mid-sized theater companies to flourish in Hamilton, and that would be 50 to 100 seat houses that can actually accommodate the needs of theater. So that would require tech, wings, backstage, etc. This is pretty rare, so we recommend that some mid-sized venues be created, and this could be in the form of new construction or conversion of old spaces. And the key to allowing this part of theater to flourish would be to make it affordable to all artists and accessible. And one of the ways to do this might be to share in the administration of these venues. in terms of film and TV, Hamilton brings in $66 million from film and TV production in any given year. It's been identified that a film commissioner or representative would be quite a useful thing to have. And this would be really useful to be able to promote the film and TV sector in Hamilton very proactively, very targeted, to do things like promote the tax credit incentive, which is one of the highest at 45% in Canada, and also to push Hamilton around major events like TIFF, things that are close to us, and then some of the things that are a little further away. Also, it was identified that more industry outreach is needed within the industry itself and within the industry in Hamilton, so that people can connect to each other, and a film commissioner could do this. Encouraging film and TV production to come to Hamilton in the immediate through initiatives that don't have to cost a lot of money. So, for example, waiving film permit fees for the next few months would allow for that. That's just one example. There are probably others we can think of. Forging a relationship with the Canadian Film Centre. It's not the Toronto Film Centre, it's the Canadian Film Centre. The centre is very keen on forming strong relationships outside the GTA. So when it's feasible to do that, to invite senior management and board members to Hamilton for a meeting. For example, the current chair is the owner of the company that makes Murdoch Mysteries, who films in Toronto, or excuse me, in Hamilton quite regularly. So to make that connection would, again, encourage and flourish the film and TV production in Hamilton. I'm going to move on to talking a little bit about equity in our sector. So with COVID, most arts organizations across Hamilton have acknowledged and vowed to address systemic anti-Black and anti-Indigenous inequities within their organizational histories and operations, which have historically been very exclusive of BIPOC communities in a city where racism is quite prevalent. We also have seen through, for example, the SPRC Bulletin Issue 19, that persons and groups already experiencing inequality are seeing the most acute effects of the pandemic and health and employment. So we have some solutions we are putting forward, defunding the Hamilton Police Services to both free up budgets to support the work of nonprofits and organizations committed to doing the challenging work of addressing racism and rebuilding our organizations to serve all Hamiltonians and to show a commitment by the city to addressing racism. Reinstating the Anti-Racism Resource Center as an independent, arm's-length organization to support arts organizations as well as other organizations across Hamilton to build their capacity to do anti-racism, anti-oppression, equity, diversity, inclusion work in their organizations with assessment metrics. City funding should divest from cultural institutions that are not actively working to decolonize and dismantle anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism within their organizations, put evaluative metrics into place that make city funding conditional on addressing institutional racism and inequities, create a policy to have a minimum of 1/3 of the seats for Coalition of Black and Racialized Artists members and or BIPOC representation on the City of Hamilton Arts Advisory Committee at all times. Lastly, City Enrichment Fund to establish a dedicated strategic funding stream, like many other funders have done, for BIPOC, LGBTQ+, and other equity-seeking artists and cultural producers at various stages in their careers. Overhaul the scarcity economy of the nonprofit arts sector that is dependent on grants, precarious employment of cultural workers, and the temporality of cultural community projects. Some recommendations for that include strategize an action plan with long-term solutions for a new economic model for the sector that is stable and supports the growth of its workers, cultural producers, and the culture of marginalized communities in sustainable ways to thrive. Create a working group after this task force that can look at this in more detail. Develop, advocate, and implement a plan for accessible, affordable housing and mental health services designed specifically for QT, BIPOC, and people with disabilities with targeted metrics to be reached annually. Arts institutions need to look inward to address chronic, inequitable practices that are embedded within their organizational cultures. We need sector-wide institutional transformation that rejects organizational assimilation to create institutional cultures of belonging that are humanizing, nurturing of, and relationship rebuilding with BIPOC and marginalized cultural producers, cultural workers, and their communities. So some suggestions there include investing in the future of the sector by resourcing emerging BIPOC artists and cultural workers with mentorship, recognition, and other opportunities to nourish their continued growth and success in the field. Again, this could be the role of a new working group, as mentioned above, to really flesh this out and think through it. Also, an advocacy role for the city for more funding for this, particularly from the province and federal funders, including the Ontario Arts Council, the Canada Council, and Canadian Heritage. Creating opportunities for BIPOC artists, curators, and community members to reinterpret permanent collections held in institutions like the one I work at, for example, from their own truths, knowledge, lived experiences, and languages. Okay, so support for small fashion businesses. I'm just moving on a little bit to fashion now. Some suggestions there include additional funding for fashion businesses and designers to assist emerging businesses, designers, and existing ones to scale up, increasing the client base, providing support by continuing to offer programs that focus on business planning and marketing, such as Digital Main Street Program and virtual business coaching, to be able to pivot and or scale up. Fashion and businesses, it's been identified, need several things right now: access to material suppliers, products due to factory closures, border crossing holdups, and impacts on shipping services. They need to find skilled workers and sewers, which is still a significant issue regardless of COVID. They need to grow online audiences and a different tone in social media content as customers' priority to purchase fashion may have decreased. Support with property costs. Escalating costs to purchase, lease, or rent retail space has been identified as an issue. So some suggestions include workforce development, attraction, retention, and development training for fashion workers. There are immediate and significant needs for skilled, trained fashion workers. Current workers who produce clothing are retiring, and in order to grow businesses and scale up, fashion businesses need more workers. Hamilton doesn't have a local supplier who trains in fashion production, so the recommendation is for the city to identify, develop partnerships, work with a trainer similar to Toronto's Fashion Exchange Program to offer some funding that will assist with the development of a program that trains and provides paid work experiences. City to also assist with attraction of skilled workers who are often trained outside of Canada, and this must be done with living wages and safe working conditions in mind. Oh, and I missed the need marketing support. E-commerce saturation means that it's difficult to cut through the noise. Property taxes. So these are some general things here. Property taxes are too expensive for arts nonprofits and small arts businesses that already have scarce resources and essentially cancel out grants from the city. So give arts organizations and businesses some property tax forgiveness. That would be immensely helpful. There has been a cost and knowledge gap identified regarding technology by smaller nonprofit arts organizations. So they're having a hard time being able to adjust to a virtual programming reality. So better access to technology for arts organizations in order to be able to deliver online programming would be essential. And this could happen through an equipment bank held at the HPL as part of its makerspace. The Hamilton Arts Council could also play a lead role in organizing knowledge workshops. There is some general confusion in Hamilton about what's open and what the protocols are in the culture sector. So a website to let Hamiltonians know about what's open or not open in the arts sector and who's got what kind of protocols would be useful. And this is something that the Hamilton Arts Council could also help with, as they've got a project, I think, underway to look at doing that. The City of Hamilton needs an updated, relevant, and actionable music strategy. So I'm moving on to music. Actionable music strategy to meet the needs of the industry in response to COVID-19. So updating the city's music strategy to provide a direction for industry recovery and ensure goals are relevant and and speak to current industry needs, seek a new report with recommendations from industry experts on the City of Hamilton music policy. Support is needed very much so by live performance venues and performance-based arts organizations to reopen after COVID. Assist with reopening venues and other arts businesses by providing continued health and safety, licensing, and bylaw support through the Small Business Center is the recommendation there. Arts organizations and artists need sustainable, so this is a more general thing as well, but arts organizations and artists need sustainable, reliable funding programs that were in place prior to COVID need to continue to support organizations in the same capacities to ensure their survival while allowing them to cover administrative staffing costs to keep arts workers employed. So some suggestions there include lobbying provincial and federal government to continue current granting programs at full funding amounts to ensure sustainability and continuity, ensure the CEF funding continues to provide full regular funding to organizations in 2021 that pay artists and arts industry workers to ensure employment continuation. Also, that will also include equity metrics as referenced above, considering creating an additional one-time grant for CEF 2021 to support careers of the hardest hit artists, including BIPOC artists, and COVID-related hardships of individual artists and musicians over the next year. Create a minimum wage pay scale for musicians hired by the city and at city-related sanctioned events to ensure musicians are paid fairly as reopening happens and afterwards. And lastly, to lobby provincially and federally to ensure that the CERB, so we wrote this before the throne speech, but anyways, CERB continues for musicians and gig workers who are unable to return to work due to gathering constraints. Ensure that the CEWS wage subsidy continues for organizations. So that's the extent of our recommendations at the moment.
Laurentia, thank you very much. Very comprehensive report. Lots of different areas that are impacted, obviously, and some of them very negatively impacted by the pandemic. Some interesting and at least one controversial recommendation in there as well. Any questions for Mayor and then Councillor Nan?
Thanks. I don't have any questions of the presenter. I just want to understand what are we going to do with these reports now that we're getting them? So what's our kind of vetting process in terms of narrowing down the recommendations that will then flow to council? Can I get a sense from you, Ron, as to how you think we're going to work through that?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. We've got a team of people looking, including some folks from the city themselves, to try to pull together the various reports. We've also engaged an external writer to help us with that. The thought was that we would do an initial pull together of a document for our meeting in October, bring it back to this group to publish it in advance to you. But get your feedback in terms of what other edits may be required. So we could take out some of the duplication, try to theme some recommendations together and so on. So that work is going to start or has just started now, working with Norm and others from the city.
Okay, so understanding, and I take the points on all the arts and cultural issues that are happening in our community. All good points. A little concerned when we start getting into defunding police and racism through this process. And so I just want to put on the table that there's got to be some sort of a process where we have some discussion about what's appropriate to come out of this task force and what might not be. And that's certainly a discussion I think we should have. So I don't suspect that we're going to have that today, but at some point, some of the recommendations I heard from this sector, I take some exception to. So I don't want to get into the major debate, but these are areas that certainly are of concern, but not one that I think the task force ought to be going into. So just put that on the table.
Yeah, no, it's a valid point. And when I referenced at least one challenging issue, it was the defunding police. And I'm not sure that we need to recommend how issues get funded. If there's a need for funding, we can leave that, I think, to council and others to determine where the funds could come from. Councilor Mann?
Thank you, through the chair, to the subgroup. I neglected to make this connection earlier, but I had spoken with a group of young folks in the summer who were interested in developing a strategy that would help enable young people to get professional experience and development in specifically the music industry, film industry, and from a multimedia communications perspective. And the thought process that they had was, if there was a training hub, not unlike some of the initiatives that we see in the building trades, for example, where young people are encouraged to participate in apprenticeship programs and then, participate in infrastructure projects as a way of getting into the industry and targeting specifically women or folks who've been from other equity-seeking groups as a way to diversify the workforce in the construction and building trades. It was a similar concept around film industry, music, and professional telecommunications and social media communication skills. And so there is a group of young people in Hamilton that are looking to kind of shape this out with partners. And if it's appropriate, I'm happy to connect them here to the subgroup, or just when we do our review of recommendations, to consider adding something like that in, because it felt very much to me like that was an example of bringing an equity lens to the recommendations in terms of population outcomes that would uplift the economic recovery on an individual perspective, but also by increasing our workforce locally for that industry, given some of the recommendations for those ones that were in the subgroup report.
Orencia, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, no, I would love to. I actually had a question related a little bit to, somewhat related to what Narinder just mentioned, that I'm realizing as everyone does their working group reports that there is quite a bit of overlap, but also that there's some things that we can draw on that are more general, that have more general application. And I wonder if it's possible to go back and revise some of our recommendations and resubmit them to the city. And so if we do that, we could include these young people and this recommendation around training for sure. Is there a possibility? I know we had to hand in our recommendations at the beginning of the week, but would it be possible to maybe do a little bit more revision, add a few things, and resubmit to the city maybe next week?
Yes, that is possible, and probably a good idea given some of the feedback you've already heard and some of the suggestions made. Any other comments or questions for this group?
I see none, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Florencia, thank you very much. We're going to move to Group 5, another group that's been hard hit by the pandemic. This is tourism and hospitality, and Brian Lubbers is going to present to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm hoping I can share here. Is that working, or?
Don't see it.
So, Brian, at the bottom of your WebEx screen, there should be a button that says Share Content. You'd click on that button and then choose the screen that you wish to share with the group.
That may be working there then.
There you go. And if you just want to just open up your slide presentation to the full view, and start from the first slide. There we go. Super.
Okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak this morning, and on behalf of our group representing the tourism and hospitality sector, as Ron mentioned, certainly we've been hard hit over the last few months with not much hope of pulling out anytime soon. Especially as we head into the fall here and sort of numbers that are a little bit unpredictable right now. So just wanted to sort of highlight the sector for us. The hospitality and tourism sector are really defined by capturing travelers into our city from a radius of 40 kilometers outside. These are dollars spent in our community on accommodations, dining, sports, meetings and events, festivals, concerts and attractions. And it extends beyond to the subsector venues like concert halls, convention center, music and theaters, arenas, stadiums. The economic impact is that it captures jobs, taxes, and money spent in our community. The subsector accommodations, about 1,200 rooms in our city. Those are hotel rooms, and also includes some rooms from the colleges and universities that do rentals during the summer months. Meetings and events. These are corporate meetings, trade shows, and conventions bringing people into our city that flow beyond to our hotels, restaurants, the airport, attractions, public transit, and local shopping. Our attractions draw visitors to various facilities. Hamilton is well known for its cultural value, historical significance, and natural beauty. The sports and entertainment, certainly a huge segment for us, $6.8 billion in Canada in the sport-related industry, and that's identified both by amateur and professional sports. In Hamilton, we have First Ontario Centre and Tim Hortons Field, other facilities that are able to host large-scale concerts, international events, which further promote the arts and culture and sport tourism. Our approach is our group. Our group relied extensively on conversation among our group and expertise from Tourism Hamilton, consultation with local leaders and experts within the subsector, and consultation with industry colleagues. And really what we wanted to highlight is the clear message that we received pretty much from everybody we talked to. And we do have some recommendations to list at the end, but until the numbers can start to rise, there's not much that we can do in terms of positive growth. So the significance of COVID-19 so far. So prior to the pandemic announcement, our hotels were experiencing 10 years of positive growth. There were 350 new guest rooms scheduled to open by the end of 2020, including a Hyatt in Hampton. We do have the Town Place Suites, which is scheduled to open this fall, so that's exciting news for the city for sure, to add some more rooms there. But in terms of the hotels that are open, all of them have experienced mass layoffs. All segments, including corporate, government, social group, sport group, and leisure travel, are just widely down. We did have a little bit of a spike over the summer, which was expected, and now we're, the fall. All of these, the demand for this is pretty much zero. Hotels are closed to the public in a lot of areas. We did have some hotels closed in Hamilton that have reopened now. And again, a lot of hotels are just, having to go way off the map and be used for other alternative types of business like hospital beds, shelters, etc. Significant reductions in occupancy and average rate that are not expected to rebound until 2025. So, we've seen overnight hits that are going to take 5 years to regrow. On the attractions side, a positive note stemming from the reduced international travel was that there was more local visitors in the city over the summer months, and some outdoor parks and conversations were filled to overflowing capacity. But certainly indoor attractions and many other outdoor attractions still deeply impacted in terms of revenue and regular operations stemming from social distancing regulations. Meetings and events. This is a $33 billion industry, and it sustains about 250,000 jobs in Canada. Many of these facilities still remain closed, layoffs and uncertainty there. Without the ability to gather people in large numbers, there's just not really any way to host these events. There's also the customer concerns and fears to host these types of events and how that would impact their own guests. And so smaller events, while we do have the ability to do some of that, when you can consider the increased staffing and safety protocols coupled with the already slim margins in this sector, it just makes hosting smaller events financially restrictive. And so a lot of places are just turning away the business altogether. Sports and entertainment. This is a hugely significant economic driver. Again, experience layoffs there. In terms of Hamilton, it's a real hub of sporting events that we see 60 to 80 sporting events in the city on an annual basis, and many of these repeat year after year. We also have citywide events such as the RBC Canadian Open and Grey Cup. You know, hopefully that will come still, but those are events that we do on occasional basis. And just putting it in perspective, Tim Hortons Field again welcomed 350,000 people in 2019, and right now is not able to be used in any way. And once again, this sector drives so many other areas for our city: hotels, restaurants, transportation, etc. So the government rules and regulations regarding COVID-19. So you know, we do understand that many sectors are suffering the effects of COVID-19, but our goal in our working group all along has been to just highlight, you know, how hard that this sector has been hit, and that we're essentially being legislated out of business. Recovery efforts are prohibitive with uncertain timelines for when we may be able to see some sort of gradual return or phased return. All decisions impacting our ability to restart are dictated and outside of our control. And certainly we're not looking to put anybody in harm. We understand that the safety measures are there in place to keep people safe, but these increased safety measures, even if we are able to start recovery, they add further costs, and again, in an already dramatically reduced revenue situation, it's creating sector-wide challenges. The key issues that we identified is the lack of international travel, elimination of mass gatherings, consumer confidence outside of any essential venues, concerns from our associates dealing with the public and increased cleanliness of our facilities, increased staffing costs to maintain pandemic procedures. We have a shortage of staff, and recalling associates has been difficult. Client concerns regarding their own accountability, as I mentioned previously, and liability for themselves, and capacity restrictions. Again, too low and not financially viable, especially for large venues who would actually be operating at a loss. So one of the largest considerations is consumer confidence. We've identified that just because people can resume these activities doesn't mean they necessarily will or will immediately. Many of the areas defined by our sector are tied to discretionary income, their wants and not needs, and so the current environment with enhanced unemployment rates and disposable income certainly are factors here. And childcare is still a vital consideration to being able to bring back our workforce. So struggling there as many other businesses are. So our greatest challenge, our industry is suffering enormous losses that will take years to recover from. Without the ability to gather large numbers, our individual sectors have almost no way to rebound and move forward in a meaningful way. Restrictions will need to be lifted as soon as it's safe to do so. And in the meantime, the extension of wage subsidies, CERB, or other unemployment benefits for our team members, as well as the extension of legislation pertaining to temporary layoff of associates, is absolutely essential for our long-term survival. The recommendations that we've identified, I'll go through the list and have a few more details than what's on the slides. Communication to our residents of Hamilton about the impact of visitors from other communities, the safety measures that are in place to reduce the risk, the economic value to our city, and just clarity on what people can and cannot do if they use the attractions and facilities, and the impact that it is or isn't having, that COVID isn't, that the impact is or isn't having on COVID cases to the community. Number two, communication to surrounding areas regarding visitation to Hamilton, the safety and the economic value again being highlighted, and let's just help try and boost some of our overused, our underused facilities that we have that, you know, many people just don't know about. Funding to the tourism sector, which will be very slow to recover. We need to be able to have a way to keep these places surviving while the downturn is there. A key thing that we want to see is providing a playbook. One thing we heard from many of our colleagues is when it comes to operating any sort of event or anything like that, is that we just don't have a playbook to how to do it. We've reached out to public health. We get different answers in many cases. A lot of times public health officials don't always know the answer, and so it's really been left up to our own discretion on how to do it safely, and that creates some unease for people who to even go forth with something, because we don't know if we're doing it correct. So having some sort of playbook that really says this is what you can and cannot do is kind of essential. We want to champion street closures and placemaking projects that help revitalize the main streets and support local businesses, attractions, and tourism facilities, and for the city to sponsor all season social distance outdoor activities by normalizing outdoor gatherings, again, when it's more safe to do so. Another key consideration is to lobby the government to look at percentages of capacities rather than a fixed number. So again, when we say 50 people, or if the numbers are reduced or up, we don't feel it always makes sense when you consider what the capacities are in general, for a place like the convention center, and large rooms, so it's fairly self-explanatory just to go as a percentage of capacity, not just a capped number. We'd like to see a major tourism marketing campaign launched for spring of 21 utilizing outdoor infrastructure. Local attractions such as Peach Festival, Art Crawl, Super Crawl can be redesigned with safety protocols in mind at larger facilities like the Ancaster Fairgrounds or Tim Hortons Field. We want to encourage the city to work with the province to seek clarity on what comes next relative to measuring status over the coming months. So, there's obviously waves of, concerns of a second wave with children back in school and just more people getting out. And, so what does that mean? Again, without having clear numbers identified to what happens with the caps and stuff like that, it's hard to make plans. We do have people requesting different types of events, and we're not sure if we're going to be able to host them or not. So something like, if the numbers get to this is what we have to do. When the numbers fall back, this is what we can do. And as we move forward, some sort of clarity around that and how the case counts impact our businesses is vital. Want to work with local, provincial health and the larger sector to develop a next stage of reopening criteria. What's required to keep people safe and allow people to progress towards normal operations. 10, we want to encourage clarity around the wage subsidy. Again, our report was put forth before the throne speech, so exciting news to see that the wage subsidy is extended. We're just not holding our breath altogether in the fact that we don't know, what the thresholds are around that. We did see the numbers being scaled back as we head into the fall, and so are they using a scaled back approach, fall, past December and into next summer? And again, we really need to encourage government, especially in this sector, that 75 to 85% is really critical with many of our staff laid off and no sales, a reduced wage subsidy is still not viable for us. We'd like to see a clear distinction between mass gatherings and the nature of business meetings and events. So again, when we just consider maybe what might just be a private party as a mass gathering is different from a meeting and event in a safe environment with protocols in place, staff, and following procedures, that there is opportunity to do these events more safely and sort of distinguish between the two. And sorry, last, hit the slide there, I'm sorry. Last is just continuation of the extension of termination severance protection beyond January 2nd, 21. So many of the employees in our business are laid off and will continue to be laid off through the fall and into next year. And so having that temporary legislation ended on January 2nd will still impact our business, and we'd like to see that pushed forward. That is my presentation for now. Thank you so much.
Brian, thank you very much. I'll just ask you to stop sharing your screen, and then we can get a view of everybody back. So, questions or comments for Brian's presentation?
I see Matt Apic.
Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just want to compliment my colleague Brian on an excellent presentation on behalf of our working group and Rondalyn and myself. I just wanted to make a couple comments underscoring some of the messages you heard there from Brian, and that specifically first lies in this notion of consumer confidence. I think ours is a sector, and perhaps there's others in other working groups culture, but just underscoring this of the lag effect of consumer confidence, and also how that will extend to labor and employment as well. I really believe that we believe there's a huge impact of just because people can do something doesn't necessarily mean they will. And as we look forward to our planning, and it's not just getting out of recovery, it's whenever the designation is made that these activities can resume, all in the industry expect and anticipate that there will be a big impact of this lag, as I said, both on the consumer side and on the employment side. So that bears watching. And I just want to make sure that that point was emphasized. Secondly, was just around timing. And this was something that we discussed at length relative to many of these events, big and small, meetings, gatherings, otherwise. You know, there is a long window from a planning perspective of these. So the other consideration here is if you lose them, they not return for multiple years. Like large scale meetings, don't come together over the course of months. Often they're planned years in advance. So one, as a result of this, it's likely you're not going to get it back for a considerable amount of time. And what else this has done is really paralyze the ability to do anything net new. So if you look over the course of a recovery period of 12 to 24 to 36 months, you have the double impact of if you lose it, it's not likely to come back. And the industry has grinded to a halt with regards to bidding and bringing new stuff in. So again, that's sports, meetings, all of the above impacted within this working group. Another issue we talked about and we wanted to highlight as well. So those are my comments, but again, kudos, Brian.
Thanks, Matt. Other comments?
I see Kathy Puckering.
Kathy?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I just want to build on to Matt and Brian's comments as well. And obviously, air transportation is very much reliant on tourism, and our niche market is those that are traveling for leisure, visit family, friends, and with the reduced travel, which we're seeing, which is about 90% down, it definitely is about building that confidence so people believe that it's safe to travel into the city on whatever mode of transportation it is. Doesn't just necessarily mean by air, and making it safe to do so and getting that message out there. But as we're trying to understand what the province is doing and what our roles are, and returning that confidence to travel and make it safe where businesses that need to crowd people in order to earn revenue, how do you make that safe and how do you get that message out? But what I just want to add to this discussion is that we have to be very careful on what other municipalities and regions are doing as well, because everybody right now is fighting for a very small amount of people that do have the confidence to travel. And if we're not competitive, and if we're not out there, and if we're not really promoting the benefits of coming to Hamilton, we could lose that market that might choose to go somewhere else. So it's really important to get out there right away. And I'll just add, and the part of the reasons for why I'm saying this is some people on this call may know that Swoop has decided to put a significant amount of its traffic into the Toronto market. And they're doing that as their own internal strategy for recovery of COVID-19. But what that's meaning now is that's putting those passengers that could or should be traveling into Hamilton into the Toronto market. So what are we going to do to replace those, and how do we make sure that there's no additional leakage of people that should be coming to Hamilton? Thank you. That's my comment.
Thank you, Kathy, for those comments. Any other comments in this presentation?
I see no other speakers, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Well, the fourth group to speak is Transportation, Building, and Infrastructure, and Mark Elliker. I'll turn it over to you, Mark. Mark, I can't hear you, though.
I've unmuted you, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present. And I'd like to thank the mayor and the task force, and also give thanks to the committee and the staff. A substantial amount of time and resources was put in to working on this task force, working group. So thanks to Kathy Puckering, Terry Johns, Tristan Jensen, and then with city staff, Carol Murillo, and Judy Lamb, and then Sue Remick, and also a thanks to Ken Albright for helping to facilitate. So we identified challenges. We also created an inventory, a list of issues, concerns, and opportunities. We also established and defined outcomes with specific deliverables, and we considered themes. So I'm going to now work through the action items, the focus area, and the priorities. So starting with focused area ground transportation, we municipal. It was a high priority, and the action items were to support shovel-ready projects that jumpstart the local economy, focus on supporting alternate modes of transportation to alleviate the gridlock on ground network, and to support acceleration of the city's transportation plan, and to ensure multiple modes of transportation services are available to the city's business parks, build awareness of the vision behind the City of Hamilton's transportation plan. Further, under focused areas, we looked at goods and movement, and we followed up. It was a high priority, and some of the action items that build supply logistics, opportunities and capacity, example, additional warehouse, increased manufacturing, and innovative distribution systems, and continue to develop business park, explore additional storage, warehouse opportunities, and increasing manufacturing and innovation distribution systems to build capacity based in Canada. City to continue to execute its transportation plan, freight and goods movement strategy, optimizing planning routes to take pressure off of key transit corridors and other modes of transportation, optimize the location of truck traffic, existing and future, to improve the efficiency of truck movements and ensure safe movement and reduce emissions, ensure smooth movement of trucks traffic across the city and into other municipalities, rail yards, marine and airport, need for data including last mile analytics, define tools, provide examples to create innovative freight hubs, ensure land is planned such as freight hubs or clusters are located near complementary uses instead of conflicting uses, identify strategies to address the impact and opportunities presented by technological advances, and best practices to be reviewed. Goods movement, we identified federal, provincial, and municipal government and industry. Priority would be high, and identify and secure logistics capacity across Hamilton in order to maintain inventory and needs and customers' demands. Travel and tourism, federal and provincial and municipal and industry were all identified as partners or ownership. It's a high priority, and implement measures to stimulate travel to promote recovery in the Canadian tourism sector, promote Hamilton as a destination for Canadians, with Tourism Hamilton and other regional partners such as Hamilton Halton, Brant Regional Tourism Association, potential for short-term wins for local Hamilton tourist destination and shop local campaigns. Ride-sharing programs was identified municipal and industry as partners and ownership. It was set at a medium, basic priorities, support these alternative modes of transportation such as Uber, Lyft, Sobi, that provide safe and accessible transportation for workers. Public transit, it was identified as a high priority, and partnerships was provincial, municipal, and industry. Continue to advocate for a $1 billion investment from the province. These monies should be directed to shovel-ready projects, including buildings and infrastructure. Ensure, sorry, I just got to flip pages. Apologies. Partnership and collaboration for health and well-being. We identified the province in a high priority, and it was lobby province to allocate funding for recovery of healthcare, substance abuse, and mental health and other key areas. Labor, we identified partnerships and ownership was with the federal, provincial, academia, and industry, and expand, and we set it at a high priority as well, and expand and build on academic programs to include supply chain industry, where there continues to be a shortage. City procurement strategies to support local supply chain, including apprenticeship development and training of skilled trades. Ensure there is awareness of proper public health and COVID measures in place, and support proper protocols and procedures for return to work, and ensure development sites can go to full activity and strength in the safest way. And these focus areas were under a COVID preparedness. So we looked at COVID prevention, we looked at coordination of the MOL, public health, and regional levels for construction industry. We also identified labor and safety on buildings and construction sites, and we basically put those all at high priorities as well. Moving forward, we also identified focus area on the Hamilton Fair Wage Policy, and it should reflect local ICI prevailing wages. We identified the municipality as a partnership and ownership on some of this. We identified it as a high priority, and advocate to support prevailing wage language for local construction workers, advocate to support prevailing wages and consistent policies for local workers. Construction contractors challenges. There are several challenges. We've identified that the partnerships and the ownership is federal, provincial, and municipal, and we put it at a high priority. City purchasing department and public works should work with contractors where possible regarding uncontrollable delays caused by the pandemic and mandatory provincial shutdown. City purchasing department and public works department meet and strategize with local contractors affected by these additional public health measures to see if there's solutions to win. Basically, the city can help eliminate future COVID-19 exposures this fall by having public health office coordinate closer with the MOL and small to mid-sized contractors who are at the greatest risk of workplace exposures due to limited resources and smaller operational scales. Also under labor, we identified challenges with WSIB. We've identified partnership and ownership for provincial, municipal, and we put it at a high priority, and advocate for WSIB claims to align with the impacts of COVID-19 and uncertainties in all sectors. We also identified under labor, jobs get people on the path to go back to work and to get the economy up and running. We identified provincial, federal, and municipal, all partners and ownership, and we set it at a high priority. And under COVID, actions under COVID preparedness, advocate to the province to designate key assets as critical provincial infrastructure, i.e. airport, deemed essential. Ensure any future restrictions on construction projects does not interfere with the critical movement of goods in PPE, etc. City needs to return to business and accelerate process to get Hamilton moving through return of administrative departments, councils, meetings, approvals, acceleration of process, and encourage development. Also under labor focus area, we identified preparedness with the second wave. And under that, we put a high priority as well. And we also identified provincial, federal, and municipal as ownership and partnership. Explore measures that would require mandatory testing for critical sectors, i.e. if second wave occurs and develops, which we are starting to see at this moment in time, unfortunately. Rapid testing and delivery of results We've also identified labor and safety on buildings and construction, and the challenges with proper protocols and procedures for return to work and ensuring development sites can get to full activity and strength in the safest way. And we looked at partnerships and partnerships and ownership was with provincial and federal and municipal, and we set it at a high priority and support proper procedures for the return to work and ensuring development sites can get to full activity and strength in the safest way. Labor and safety and PPE was another focused area, and we identified challenges, increased safety measures, including site disinfecting, deep cleaning, COVID tracing, tracking, and all the issues tied around the pandemic and public safety. So we looked at provincial, federal, and municipal, and we put high priorities on that as well. Building capacity to ensure adequate commercial warehouse space today. We also identified municipal, provincial, and industry as partners and ownership, and put it on a high priority, and accelerate development of business parks and basically AEGD lands. We are focused, also looked at building capacity and ensure to access programs to support infrastructure investment. Construction investment will help restart the economy. We looked at partnership and ownership, was federal, provincial, and municipal, and industry, and we set high priorities, and we were looked to accelerate future major infrastructure projects through coordinating funding through the province and federal levels of government, advance shovel-ready and shovel-worthy core infrastructure projects, roads, transit, water, and wastewater. We also focus area with build capacity, ensure provincial plans include short-term investments for Hamilton businesses. We identified partnership and ownership with the province. We put that at a high priority and create a list of priority projects and ensure the province is in receipt for consideration and inclusion into the fall 2020 budget. So that was a timely. Small business, we also identified build capacity, small business as a focus area as tools for economic recovery. More challenging for the small and mid-sized contractors. So ongoing discussions with that. Process improvements, we also identified a focus area for process improvements, challenges to tenders areas not being decided at the cost of public safety. So there was some discussions around having proper protocols in place and making sure that those issues are being followed through on the job sites, and making sure that public health initiatives are being followed by the contractors and everybody on site. Process improvement, innovations, and new tools. We identified the province, provincial, and municipal governments ensure city can access the federal and Ontario provincial government voluntary COVID alert app. So that was an awareness. We looked at identifying the COVID app as a good way to help public health continue to do tracking and tracing. So we just brought that as an example of a good way the community could try to help by downloading the app. Process improvement was a focus area, and ensuring planning department accelerates approvals. We looked at the municipal and the provincial as the partners, and we put it at a high priority, and to encourage the city to ensure process changes can continue with proper resources and staff support, ensure expediting changes can continue to happen at the same rate into the future, encourage hiring of more city staff, lobby and advocate at provincial levels, and provide support for partners, associations, basically OHBA and the CHBA and other HBA lobbying for similar issues and efforts. So that's through the Hamilton and the Ontario and Canadian Building Associations. So that's high and moderate priorities set there. And then process improvements, ensuring confidence in Hamilton and the markets for all. We identified it was a municipality, and as the ownership and the partnership, we put it at a high priority and to establish good working relationships with city staff and stakeholders for collaboration on process improvements to attract new homeowners, business owners, and developers and tourism, etc. We also identify high priorities to provide actions for new ideas to city staff and council for joint efforts at provincial level for policy change regarding building reserve funds. That was set as a high priority. Also identified in response, the province regulates the Building Reserve Fund through the Building Code Act. What those building reserve funds can be used for, we would have to start at provincial level to allow municipalities to use these reserve funds for different uses aside from administration of the building code only. Encourage staff and council to explore requirements through task force as an opportunity for economic recovery and stimulus. Identified supply of land to support supply of housing as a focus area. We looked at partnership and ownership was the province and municipality, and it was a high priority as well. And lobby and advocate at a provincial level with growth-related policies and land needs assessments to ensure land and supply will continue, or if boundaries, or if boundaries expansions are necessary. We also identified actions, encourage, and under high priorities, encourage processing improvements to encourage development, and on a moderate priorities, build on existing municipal incentives, housing and affordable housing options, and moderate priorities as well, keep people living and working in Hamilton with continued support to the housing and development industry. We also looked at focus areas of lobbying and advocacy, and we identified federal, provincial, municipal, and industry as ownership and partnership. And under the action items, we priorities for moderate for advocacy and awareness, and we looked at priorities moderate, encourage partnerships and collaborations with similar stakeholders for collective messaging and lobbying efforts at the provincial and federal level. Development industry as a tool for economic recovery, jobs and infrastructure. That was a focus area. And once again, we identified partnership with federal, provincial, and municipal and industry. And we rated as priorities moderate, support lobbying efforts for economic and job-related efforts with development and industry associations. Put a high priority on ensure construction and development are essential and will not get shut down going forward. And moderate lobby for home renovation tax credit at provincial level. The OHBA, Ontario Home Builders Association, pushing for provincial HRTC as an economic stimulus as it provides an effective tool for combating underground cash economy and protecting economy and protects integrity of renovators, contractors, etc., as well as the provincial tax base. We also looked at ensure incentives provided by governments as obligations to keep investments and create sustainable jobs in the local region. And then focus area, we also identified development industries as a tool for economic recovery, operating process and procedures. We identified it was at the municipal ownership and partnership level, and put high priority on working with the city staff to encourage changes, improvements, expedite process, and push for any positive changes to continue into future process. We also identified actions under a moderate for lobbying at provincial level for policy change. And we also moderate encourage municipalities to accept surety bonds as financial security for projects to secure municipal agreements. There was substantial discussions with Trucking Association, Harbor. We also spoke with the Chamber of Commerce, contractors, builders. There was also provincial building trades involved. And we also had stakeholders from the industrial, and we also had staff represent bring some information forward. And we were also looking at the master plans for transportation and for the blast network. So that's my presentation, and thank you very much.
Mark, thank you for that. We'll just ask you to stop sharing the screen now. Invite everyone else back. That's a very long list.
There was a lot in there.
There is a lot in there. Can I just ask for any comments or questions of Mark or of Group 7? Terry?
Terry. Yeah.
So you can see from the presentation, we had a large area for the three of us to cover. But having said that, there were certainly a lot of overlaps in it in terms of how everything is interconnected. And I think we're seeing that in other working groups this morning as well. As much as a lot of what you saw from the building perspective was high level and about lobbying, I'd like to point out we have 3 or 4 actual quick solutions in there that we will be following up with Jason Thorne and his department on in terms of, for instance, some parking incentives for downtown development, the building reserve fund, and a couple of other ones that you saw. So I just wanted to say we will be following up with those as action items while the report is being written.
Terry, thank you for that. Any other comments?
I see Kathy puckering.
Kathy?
Oh.
No. I'll unmute you, Kathy.
Oh, thank you. Okay. And I just wanted to add to that some of the items that we've identified through the process. We've been following through where the responsibility is on our own. So, for example, we had the premier to the airport over the past few weeks, also had the labor minister to the airport as well. And it's not just about discussing what's going on at the airport. It's really bragging about the opportunities that are in Hamilton and how do we improve the capacity, build out, improve the roads, and basically just ensure that we're on the province's thoughts when they're going through their planning exercise. And it was a really good opportunity to talk about, all of the jobs that are happening, all of the construction that's happening, the integration that we have, the transportation, tourism, Mohawk College and its new facility that's being expanded, and really addressing the labor force on do we have the capacity? Are we putting out the people that we need to meet the shortages that we're seeing right now in supply chain and trucking and, aviation and technicians? So we're hopeful that we got their attention, and we'll just continue to be pursuing being on their radar and having those list of items there. So if and when there's monies available, that Hamilton is the recipient of that. And then just following the throne speech, one of the items in there that came out the other day, or was it Wednesday, Thursday, was the fact that there might be some focus on regional travel, and we'll continue to monitor that and just understand, what opportunities exist for us there as well. And those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. I have Rob McCann next on the speaker's list.
Yeah, hello. So the first recommendation you had suggested alternative modes of transportation to alleviate gridlock and shovel-ready projects. As you may recall, Work Group 6 made a recommendation to prioritize LRT. So I'm just, although you didn't call it out, I'm wondering if Work Group 7 would actually be supportive of that recommendation as well.
I think we were, sorry, through the chair, if I may answer that, we were a little neutral on our position there, and the comments were to ensure that the $1 billion that's been allocated by the province is allocated to the correct projects for Hamilton.
And through the chair, if I may, from building trades perspective, we're looking at opportunity, obviously $1 billion investment, pathways to employment, apprenticeship, and opportunities to put people in the trades. We are definitely supportive of the $1 billion investment for the LRT.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers that wish to speak to this presentation from Group 7? Yeah, Councillor Mann.
Councillor, can you check your headset, please? I've got you unmuted on our end.
Thank you. Good morning. Half a cup of coffee so far. Bear with me. Thank you for the presentation. Similarly, there was a group that I met with yesterday that was made up of planners, architects, design firms, and of the sort around the built environment in Hamilton. And that group has been hosting a series of collaborative sessions within the industry and have been also kind of thinking through what some rapid recovery solutions could be for the city of Hamilton. And I know that they have previously released or publicized a collaborative session that focused on placemaking and how we might be able to act nimbly to encourage certain projects to come forward. And I understand that they're also in the process of finalizing some policy kind of recommendations in terms of ideas such as how can the city of Hamilton facilitate the 15-minute neighborhood as something that we could achieve through a very focused, strategic, urban and suburban design principles that could help shape city building moving forward, but that actually take COVID health kind of frameworks into the future of building in this city. So in those kinds of scenarios, I was just curious, as it relates to this subgroup, but also generally speaking in terms of COVID recovery recommendations, would it make sense for us to invite those documents to come to this table, or invite the subgroup to connect with that group of people?
Terry, were you looking to respond to that?
Yes, I just wanted to build upon that. Our office has been part of those discussions, and it's been just a great experience, bringing everybody together from different perspectives in terms of planning and design. I would suggest that I think we would benefit from the resource of having those items, the papers they've done, in our website that we have for sharing. I think that they will help with context for the report that's the final report that's going to come out.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? I don't see any other speakers.
I see no other speakers, Mr. Chair.
Okay, does anybody from group 1, 2, or 6 wish to make any comments? Okay, seeing none, I'd like a mover to accept and receive the information that we've heard. Thank you, Anthony, and a seconder. Thank you, Judy. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on then to section item 5.3, which is workforce planning, Hamilton's restart and recovery survey results. And I'm going to ask Judy Travis of Workforce Planning Hamilton to speak to the restart and recovery survey results. So Judy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the introduction. We also want to say how much we appreciate the support of the Economic Task Force for their support in distributing the survey and getting the word out about it. We were moderately pleased, I guess, with the results. We had 244 surveys to analyze at the end of the day, and they represented all sectors and sizes. And we of course heard a lot from some of the sectors that we've heard from today. I would say overall the results were more or less what we would have expected given the times, but what it does is it gives us some metrics to sort of gauge our response to some of the things that we're doing, what's most important to some employers, where they're finding it challenging, and it's broader context, I would say, for this committee to think about, and perhaps as we craft the final report, just decide to take a closer look at where some of the immediate needs are. Our focus was really on what they've experienced, what their challenges are, and what they're looking forward to or not, as the case may be, for the next 6 months. And so I just you've all received, we did some special analysis for each of the working groups. We did the best we could. The working groups, we gathered the information by the North American Industry Classification System, the NAICS codes, and we did the best we could to sort of craft working group reports that reflected the sectors that you were representing. And so you've all had a chance to take a look at those reports. I know they're posted on the website. And so you've probably taken a look at that. We presented the information with the broad results for all employers, and then how your working group membership makeup was either reflected or didn't reflect that particular response, the general response, the aggregate response. So just a few things to sort of highlight for the committee overall, and for the consideration, as we move towards the final report. We started by asking them, whether they were growing and declining or staying the same. We always ask that question when we do our employer one. Almost every year in the past 3 or 4 years, we've seen that the broadest number of employers are growing. So we asked them pre-pandemic where they were at, and 65% said they were growing. And now in the pandemic times, it's only 15%. So that pretty much paints the picture of where we're at right now. 55% said they were declining, and and about a third were staying the same before and during, but I would say that we're, obviously we're struggling right now. And about 55% are just currently they're operating at partial capacity. 55% of employers are not hiring at all, and those that are hiring are having quite a bit of difficulty finding workers. 23% have had some permanent layoffs, and 55% have temporary layoffs right now. Manufacturing is one that has a huge number of temporary layoffs. So we also asked them about their work arrangements. So how many are working remotely? About 50% of the employers that responded to our survey had some percentage of their workforce working remotely. And I would say, of those that were, then about a third of them had 100% of their 75 to 100% of their workforce working remotely. And we asked them if this was going to be a permanent arrangement for them. We're seeing out there more broadly that some, places like Shopify are moving away from having an office environment, but 50% were unsure as to whether they were actually going to do that. 25% said yes, that may be their permanent situation going forward. We asked them about the obstacles in working remotely, and for those that had people working remotely, home internet was the biggest challenge. Online meeting fatigue was another one, and childminding. Those were sort of the top three. We talked to them about workplace safety. One thing we learned was that 63% of them have a crisis response plan in place already, or they're building one. So, but there still are some employers who don't have a plan in place. They were looking for support. One of the things they were looking for support on around workplace safety was, and we heard that in some of the presentations today, was sort of clear information about the industry guidelines. So 52% of employers thought that would be extremely valuable. 80% thought it was somewhat valuable, and like overall, it was about 82% that thought it would be valuable. And then the other thing that they were looking at was, and we've talked about it here at the task force as well, is around increased availability of PPE. So those are a couple of things that we could perhaps think about working on right away. Many, or over half, are not sure if they have enough PPE for the next 6 months. So I think that this is something maybe we want to think about as we move forward. And 63% are concerned about the cost of it, particularly accommodation, food services, and construction. were a couple of the sectors that thought that that was of significant concern for them. We also asked them about the consumer demand. We heard about that a little bit in some of in the presentations today, and of course, many of them thought that that had decreased significantly. So there was a small number, about a quarter of them, that thought consumer demand had increased, and it depends on the sector they're from. In terms of looking forward for the next 6 months, we asked them about childcare. Is that a concern? And it was about 43% of employers were concerned about childcare for their workforce, and we also asked them about HSR services, and it wasn't a particular concern for some at all. So a very small number were concerned about HSR services. Many have or are working on new business strategies to adapt and in these times, and then we also asked, the one thing that I thought was really concerning was looking at we asked them if they'd completed a cash flow projection for the next 6 months and what best describes their situation. And 13% of employers said they need help now, and 19% said they will be in trouble in the within a few months. So so I think there are some folks out there that and we can work with economic development to make sure that these folks are flagged and spoken to, and so that we can show them the support that they might potentially need. And then finally, we asked about their hiring intentions over the next 6 months, and 36% of employers plan to hire, and so that's about 89 employers. So not as robust a hiring scenario as we've had in the past few years. I mean, where we were practically to the point of finding that there were significant skill shortages in some sectors, but there is some hiring afoot, and mostly 59% of them are going to be hiring for full-time positions. So that's what the sort of the key findings for right now. I'd be happy to take any questions you might have, so thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Judy, thank you very much for sharing the survey results. Some sobering numbers and statistics there for sure. Any questions for Judy?
I see no raised hands, Mr. Chair.
Okay, then can I get a mover to receive the information, please? I see Mark, thank you very much. And a seconder, Anthony, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Judy, for that. We'll move to the next item, which was included in the addendum to the agenda, and I'm going to ask Anthony Marco, a representative of the Hamilton District Labor Council and the Mayor's Task Force, to speak to this item.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I do want to I give a bit of an explanation and a bit of a rationale for why this report is coming in the way it's coming in. And I also want to preface this by saying that I think that when the system was formed for how we were going to bring back information to this task force, I certainly haven't been on a task force like this before. And admittedly, part of it very well could have been part of my failing to realize that the opportunity to bring back some of the concerns that labor has around some of these issues, considering that labor was treated as a lens and not included on any of the the work groups, that some of the information might not flow back in the way that I was expecting it to. I certainly can't expect that that was the reflection of other people. But I know that one of the reasons that I wasn't put on one of the work groups and labor wasn't put specifically on a work group is because it was a lens and that we would be available to all of the work groups at the same time. In the middle of this process, I expressed a little bit of concern with our chair and a couple of other people with regards to the fact that even though we had made ourselves accessible to all of the work groups, that to this date, we have not been called to one single work group or have been asked for input on one single work group. And I appreciate the fact that there are a lot of concerns that are happening, immediate concerns that are happening with regards to economic recovery, with regards to many of the sector-based economies that we are dealing with around this task force. And so I don't necessarily want to put that as a statement of blame on anybody, but what I do want to say is failing that opportunity to be able to express some of the broader concerns of labor within the individual work groups, I thought it would probably be best to bring it to a broader forum. And to be honest with you, probably from the beginning, I should have probably figured that out myself and expressed that and said that many of the concerns of the working class and many of the concerns of workers out there are not necessarily sector-based. Some of them certainly are, but a lot of the broader ones need to be addressed on a broader level. And so the following report has been put together with recommendations. I'm actually glad to see that when we were speaking to some of the environmental lens that we talked about in climate change lens earlier, that they came forward with recommendations as well. I get the impression that when we get all of these reports back from the work groups today, that we are going to be taking these away and looking at them through the three lenses. So one of the things that I wanted to provide was some kind of a document, and I know that we had the quote unquote lunch and learns, the panels that provided some information to a couple of the work groups as they met, but there wasn't necessarily any recommendations attached to that. So if you would indulge me to just quickly go over the report I've provided, I can certainly take any questions at the end of it. It boils down to 9 recommendations. A lot of this stuff is stuff that's probably doesn't surprise you coming from organized labor. Although in as much as we directly represent at the Labor Council 50,000 affiliated union members in this city, we are in regular contact with unorganized labor, just regular working class groups as well. And so we as much as possible, try and filter in some of that information from them as well. We speak regularly to living wage, not only to the city, and I know the city councilors and the mayor are used to hearing us speak about living wage. And so we are certainly advocating for the idea of a living wage for everybody across this city. And we hope that we eventually get there. We understand that the minimum wage is going to be going up again very soon, if not happening over the next week or so, to $15.25. And Hamilton's living wage is $16.45. And we do believe that everybody in the city should be making a living wage, and we should have pathways to get there from businesses around the city. So a couple of our recommendations come around living wage. But not only that, to also, if you are a company that deals with procurement or deals with tendering policies, that you're large enough to actually have policies around such things, that you write living wage into those policies as well. We are hopefully going to be at some point advocating for the city to do this and some larger institutional partners around the city to do this. There's a great example in New Westminster, BC, where for years now they've had a living wage in New Westminster for all city employees, and they have it written right into all of their tendering packages and all of their procurement packages as well. That we need to make strong efforts towards ending wage discrimination. We know that wage discrimination happens not only with women, but racialized women make 40% less, Indigenous women make 45% less, immigrant women make 55% less, and women with a disability make 56% less. We need commitments at all levels of sizes of businesses around the city to really examine what their pay equity is like, and make sure that we can raise those levels of equity. So we have a recommendation with regards to undertaking pay equity assessments within businesses to start that work. In consultation with, there's the Ontario Pay Equity Commission for gender equity, but there's also a standard set by the Canadian Human Rights Commission as well. And so starting to learn about some of those things, and if you're a business that maybe hasn't undertaken that, to at least start to think about it and start down that path. Like, that's what we hope these recommendations hopefully put into the minds of people, because our workforce in Hamilton is getting more diverse, and we need to start to recognize some of those things exist, whether we believe they exist or not. A lot of this is taken from data which has been generated for years and years and years, and we have to realize that we may not believe that we are culprits, but ultimately we may be that way. We may unintentionally have pay structures which we don't even think are necessarily discriminatory, but they very well might be. So it's a good idea to take a look at those at this time. We were very careful not to put recommendations in with too much regards to provincial and federal. However, we do strongly believe as Labor that a national pharmacare and dental care plan not only benefits everyone, every worker across the country, every person across the country, but in many cases benefits a lot of small businesses as well, because now you've got healthier workers who are ready to work, don't need to take as many sick days. If you look at the economics of a national pharmacare plan, it can actually save the country over $4 billion a year in bulk buying of pharmaceuticals. So one of the recommendations is just that we help to advocate for that. And we know that we don't have a direct influence on it, but that would be something that we would hope that we could promote. A couple of our next recommendations come around the fact of occupational health and safety. And I know a lot of the people around this task force, from just listening to you all over the past few months, have a level of awareness with regards to health and safety. But we hope that coming from this task force, if we can adopt some of these recommendations, that some of this information will trickle down as well. We just talk about a couple specific elements within the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which are making sure that all employers do everything that all precautions reasonable in the circumstances for the protection of a worker. That should go without saying for many people, but in a lot of cases, sometimes it gets shelved a little bit as we have our focus on other things. So we just want to kind of reinforce that. And the other one, we're hearing stories now across different sectors with regards to what essentially amounts to whistleblowing status, that when somebody calls to report a scenario where there is unsafe conditions happening, that they are being disciplined and or terminated. And we would like some reaffirmation from employers around this city that they are committing to the fact that, if they have workers that are under the act reporting things that need to be reported, that there should be no discipline and or termination and or severance with any of those employees. Our next recommendation comes with regards to workers deserve to be in workplaces free of gender-based harassment and violence. This has been an ongoing push from the Canadian Labour Congress for many years now. And the recommendation that we have is more around an internal policy and practices and procedures. A lot of small, medium-sized businesses might not have set out procedures with regards to this. So ensuring effective and impartial mechanisms are in place to ensure investigation of complaints, providing support and protection for survivors of gender-based violence, and holding perpetrators accountable. We've heard way too many stories of places where the victim is being held to blame in workplace cases. And in some cases where even as it gets to a small business where, that mantra of the customer is always right, in some cases the customer is wrong, and in some cases the customer needs to be held accountable, especially when it comes to violence. And I know that a lot of the people around this table agree with this because, I know several of you, and we've talked about such issues before. One of the crossovers that we have with regards to this report is with regards to a just transition. And I'm glad to see that some of this was echoed in the environmental and climate change, climate action lens as well. But the idea that the City of Hamilton should set, there's a little bit of a typo in there, should connect any existing targets for greenhouse gas emissions to future infrastructure development in renewable energies, home building retrofits, public transit, and just transition measures supporting workers and their families. This also comes on the basis of the fact that when we talk about just transition, we have to acknowledge the fact that environmental racism is definitely real in our city. That when we talk about racialized people in our city and other marginalized people in our city, they are most often the ones who are the most impacted by some of the issues that we have with regards to environmental threats in our city, and they face them on a day-to-day basis. And if we are going to start to fight back against that, we need to fight back against that and realize that that racialized lens also intersects with a worker lens, and it also intersects with an environmental lens. And we have to look at that in a bit of a holistic manner, and we can't just address one without addressing the other. Our next recommendation would be along the lines of that the City of Hamilton and other large employers, if they agree with these decent work practices, should be modeling some of these work practices for other smaller institutions as well. It's one of the reasons why when we talk about living wage, we talk to the City of Hamilton, and we're going to start to talk to large institutional organizations around the city, because the hope is that you get a trickle-down effect or a domino effect, that as we start to improve working conditions for people in big institutions and big organizations, that it will start to trickle down to smaller ones as well. And so we would hope that that recommendation would resonate with some people. The last page of the report is just all of the recommendations put together in a summary of them. As I said, we tried to keep to very broad-based things for the time being. We realized that the sectors were going to do specific sector-based information, but we wanted to kind of look at the larger scale picture. Some of this stuff is stuff that we hope everybody is already doing, and many of these recommendations are looking for an affirmation to kind of send the message not just through your own sectors, but as it trickles down through other sectors as well, because we believe that sending the messages out that are contained within these recommendations can be a useful message to businesses across the city, or to people who are looking to come into the city and start new businesses as well. That if we have a culture of respect for our workers in our city, and not only just a respect, but for a reputation whereby employers in Hamilton treat their employees really, really well, then that's going to help everybody to try and get employees and quality employees and trained employees to come to this city. And we heard earlier about some of the sectors that are having a tough time actually getting people in some of the jobs. Having a reputation that we can promote out there, saying, you know, these are some of the things that we adhere to, and we respect workers in this city. And you know, we've got large institutional partners who are willing to say, these are some of the commitments that we are willing to make to our employees. I think goes a long way, and lets people know who are maybe thinking about coming to the city, who have training, who are qualified employees, and who are looking for jobs, that this is a good place to come and a good place to live. So I will end it there. I am certainly happy to leave this with you to absorb. I realize you got it on short notice. But like I say, many of the reports that I heard today, I also was hearing for the first time today as well. And so I will need some time to digest them as well. So in the spirit of allowing me to digest some of that information, I would hope that maybe you can take this away and do that as well. But I'm certainly willing to take any questions as you do that. Thank you, Chair.
Anthony, thank you very much. Thanks for putting together the work, and thank you for your passion for labor and how that comes across. And it's going to be helpful as we prepare the report. Any questions for Anthony this time?
I see no speakers, Mr. Chair.
Okay, then I would...
Councillor Nan, I believe.
Councillor Nan.
Thank you. Thank you through the chair, and thank you for the report, Anthony. So similarly, I think with the equity lens and the climate lens, and I had mentioned this to the chair as well, that in the next steps of reviewing the recommendations and moving us towards a final suite of recommendations coming out of this task force for consideration, I think that you aptly put it in terms of applying those three lenses to the recommendations that the subgroups have submitted. And I'd be happy to review from those lens perspectives in terms of getting us there as well. So yeah, I just appreciate you saying that last part there and integrating it into a lens review for the next stage of reports that we review.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Okay, then I'd entertain a motion to accept this report from Anthony and on the labor lens. Can I have a mover, please? Florencia, thank you. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Nan. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you so much. Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Is there any other business that anybody wants to raise? If not, I'm going to talk about next steps and timing. But is there anything else anybody else would like to raise before that? Okay. Yes, Rob. Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, perhaps you're going to talk about this now, so you can just stop me if that's the case. But it appears we have some great recommendations across all of the working groups, and clearly, I would imagine each one of the working groups achieved consensus amongst themselves. But in the next steps, is there an opportunity for the task force as a whole to help decide what's going to go forward?
Yeah, great suggestion. So what I was going to do was, thank you, Rob, was to talk about how we might take 7 very different reports, including 3 report backs from the different from EDI and labor and climate action, and try to make some sense of all that before we get into sort of writing it up. So what we were suggesting was that we would maybe consider a smaller group of the entire entity, maybe could consist of chairs from each of the working groups if we want to do that, or whatever that looks like, to work with some staff and others to try to go through and figure out where there's commonalities, where things can be lumped together, where there's specific recommendations and quick wins for the council, where there's recommendations that may be directed to another level of government around lobbying or other things, or regulation changes, so that we can start to bucket some of this and then find out where there's duplication, try to edit it down a little bit. So I'm open to suggestions in terms of who might like to do that. Councillor Nan has already offered her support in looking at it from a lens point of view. Terry, I'm wondering if you had any specific thoughts in terms that you wanted to add to this discussion at this point, because I know we've had some discussion about next steps.
I don't, other than I suspect we could use the chairs in terms of dispersing information and getting reviews done.
Our hope was, just in terms of timing, we have a writer ready to go, and staff are prepared to support this process. Our hope was that we could start to do some editing of the total content over the next couple of weeks, with a week or two after that supporting the writing, and we'd have a draft report to bring back to the task force at a meeting towards the end of October. Any thoughts?
In the perfect world, we would have it all reviewed for presentation at the October meeting. I just don't know how realistic that is.
We are so far from a perfect world right now. Anthony, do you have a...
Fair enough.
The only question that I had is now that we've got this kind of list of recommendations, and it is, if you put them all together, it's quite an exhaustive list. Is there the equivalent of a traffic flow process through city staff at this point, where we can say that ultimately, 40 or 50 of these recommendations are going to have to be touched by city staff at some point, and at some point, maybe 30 of those have already been started and or addressed, or at some level of completion already that we're just not aware of? Because just because we came up with recommendations doesn't necessarily mean that they're not already in the works. So I'm wondering if that aspect of it could help to winnow down some of the numbers that we have.
Yeah, good point. I know Norm is on the call, and Norm, I don't know if you want to speak to that, or Jeanette wants to speak to that, since it's her staff we'd be leaning on to help this happen.
Jeanette, do you want to take a stab at that, or would you like me to?
I'll start at it.
Yeah.
Definitely, I think. Oh, I don't have my video on. Sorry about that. Definitely, I think staff can take a crack at trying to whittle it down in terms of there's from listening to all the work group reports, there's some common themes. So I think that can whittle it down. There could be lenses we put through, like what's doable in the next, now to 6 months, and group them a bit that way, because you want more clarity on the ones that are short term, and then long term could be something that comes back and be revisited. We could definitely pull out ones that are already in action and kind of bucket them. So I'm trying to think of how we kind of whittle it down in terms of either both numbers as well as kind of buckets, for lack of a better word. And I think staff could take a crack at that. Norm, I'm volunteering you in the team, so feel free to speak up now or forever hold your peace.
No, I definitely think that would be a good use of our time, Jeanette and Mr. Chair, in terms of taking a look at that list. There certainly are some of those recommendations that have been put forward that are in progress or may have already been completed. So that would certainly be ways to winnow down that list. And as well as, like you said, Jeanette, create those buckets to make it easier, not just for ourselves, but even for the writer as she puts this together as well. So it'll be a bit of an exercise, but I think we anticipated this was coming, so I think we're prepared for that. So.
Okay, well, I think that would be a helpful process. And then I think as resources, I would encourage you to reach out for clarification of points to anybody on the task force, but maybe specifically to the chairs of the working groups or the subject matter experts for the lens areas. So Anthony for labor, for example, I think would be useful. Jeanette? Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Just one further comment. I know for all the work groups, you kind of worked in isolation, obviously, but you've now heard everybody else's presentations. And I heard one of the groups said, you know, after hearing the others, I'd like to take one quick look. So I don't know whether any, like the work group chairs want to take another quick look of what they submitted, whether after hearing the whole thing, they would, I don't know, prioritize different or you know, just wanted to put that out there that if anybody wants to do that, we should do that first before the staff start doing their work.
Yeah, and I would add to that, if you've got a list with 20 high priorities, you need to probably go through one more time and get it down to a much smaller number. If they don't fit on one hand, they're not really priorities. So I do think, it would be worthwhile, and I would encourage you to take, the next few days to do that and have one more look and make sure that that's really what you want to submit. And I think if what's today, is it 25th? Yeah. If we gave you to the close of the day on the 30th, on next Wednesday, have all your reports to us, sort of finalized, reprioritized, any edits made, I think that would be okay. We can start with working with the draft reports on Monday, but we'll use the final reports for the writer. Is that reasonable? And a couple thumbs up. Nobody saying, no, that's terrible that you've given us 3 more days. So, okay. All right, so let's do that. We're going to lean heavily on the Jeanette staff through Norm and others to take a look and bucket and deduplicate and prioritize and indicate which ones are short-term priorities, which ones are already underway, which ones may require help from other levels of government to accomplish. And the goal is to move as quickly as we can, obviously, to try to get this back in front of this task force late October. Lauren, can I ask you what date do we want to suggest as the next meeting?
I have scheduled, and I'll just let me make sure I'm saying the correct date. I believe it's the 27th of October.
Great. Before we go trick-or-treating, we want to be back to be able to take a look at the draft report. So that's our hope, and we'll have to work, obviously, with the crew that are writing as well. But does that work for everybody? Okay, good. All right. Any other business? Any other business? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn? Mark, that was really quick. And Patty, thank you very much. We are done. Thank you all very much. I'm going to assume that nobody's going to object to that, so we'll take that as fait complete. Thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day.